Ξεκινάμε το δεύτερο μέρος με σκοπό να ψηλαφίσει, να δείξει και εν τέλει εισφέρει χρηστικό περιεχόμενο σε σχέση με τις απειράριθμες προκλήσεις σε επίπεδο δεδομένων. Ιδανικός πλοηγός ο κύριος Michael Palladino, Director Enterprise Operational Excellence και Enterprise Agility στην Bristol Myers Squibb. Μαζί του θα είναι και, ή τουλάχιστον στην αρχή, ο κύριος Γιώργος Διακονικολάου, προκειμένου να διαδράσει με τον ίδιο.
Yeah. We're on.
I thought you were doing my presentation, George. No?
Yes,
Okay.
I can.
Okay.
You.
I'm going to ask him to help me and do my presentation instead. Thank you. You ready for the first slide?
Hi, Mike.
Okay.
I'm just here to prevent him doing the worm. Okay, this is my role.
Okay. I'm ready.
No, don't.
No. Okay.
I'm happy to have you for second time in this today's event. I was looking at your short bio here we have, and I could see this totally small company, Bristol Myers Squibb Pharmaceuticals. Yep. Nobody knows it. And adjunct professor in Columbia University and Villanova University. Nobody knows that universities. I was just wondering about your involvement with PMI. I can see that you are and you were very actively involved with PMI. What is PMI DVC?
Yeah, PMI DVC is Delaware Valley Chapter. I'm out of Philadelphia, and what's interesting is PMI headquarters is located in our chapter. So many times we have our board meetings at the headquarters. So we get to meet all the board members, we get to meet all of the folks there. And for those of you who remember Jim Snyder, he was one of the founders of PMI. He was also part of our chapter, and I was very fortunate to be able to work with Jim and learn about the chapter, the history, and he was a great mentor for all of us.
Okay, great. And you were the president of the chapter.
Yep. Past president, yes.
Yeah. Excellent. And so why, apart from the worm and things like that, why people need to pay attention to you right now, what they are going to get at the end, until the end of the presentation?
So some of you, I know, saw my presentation yesterday. What I like to do is think about the people equation of AI. We hear a lot of the tools, we hear a lot of the techniques, but I think it's important to remember the people component. That's certainly what affects us. So today, as I've done the research, I wanted to understand how the data connects in the systems. What are some of the funny results we see? What are the unexpected results? And just try to connect those elements together, but to do it in a way that's a non-technical way, just to help understand the concepts of what we need to do as we're working with these tools.
Excellent. I'm going to enjoy from downstairs. The floor is yours.
You're not going to stay up here, George?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. No, thank you. Appreciate it. And as I said, I'm doing research for this presentation, and quite a bit of what we're doing is the presentation tells me where it wants to go. What I initially think it will be, it sometimes turns into something else. So let's turn the page. Woo. Okay, good. It leads me down rabbit holes. As I go down and I try to understand different concepts, sometimes I can get very deep and I go, uh-oh, too far, come back up. How does it make sense and tell a story? So where I focused on is around the data. There's primarily two sections. One is around large historical data sets. We hear a lot about that. That's where many of the engines are trained. That's where a lot of the information comes from. But I'm also going to talk about the smaller data sets, new ideas, new creativity. That is a little bit different. And as I said, a lot of the training is on the larger data sets, and we do get some challenges with the smaller data sets. We'll start with the large data sets. As we go through, we start realizing where its value is detecting patterns It's summarizing that data. We've heard that from many of our other presenters yesterday and today. And as well as how can we learn from that past experience? That's the value of those larger data sets. And as we go through, we look at where does it come out and display itself. We've seen yesterday many examples of images, music, photos, of how we can work with AI to detect those patterns, to understand how do we create those new environments. But what's also interesting is, what is the implication? What's the challenge when we do that? What are some of those other elements we need to be aware of? Certainly with documents, video conferencing, there's spaces here. There's certainly around past documents summarizing information. Again, we've seen that over the day and a half so far. We also heard Peter talk about what's the value to project managers. Why do we do it? What do we get out of that? Certainly we hear things about collecting the data, the survey, how we can also summarize information. We've turned on different tools at our company where we go into a Teams meeting. In the past, I only received the transcription. Now, I receive a short summary of the meeting. We see that in Zoom and other tools. Very powerful, very fun. What I also, though, see is we're having an adoption problem because we think about it, it's almost like we're cheating. It's almost as if, are we allowed to do this? It doesn't feel right. But think back to how we used Google Search, other tools, things like Google Maps. In the beginning, we're using paper maps to travel. Now, all of a sudden, we have it in our hand. It just doesn't feel right. But today, we're very comfortable doing that. And as I talked about yesterday, this is just another transformation, another revolution. We've gone through so many in the past that it's now changing. We're on the other side. We're on the early side. It's scary for us. Other revolutions, we're past that, so we're comfortable. We don't think about it. Our fathers, grandfathers, grandmothers were shocked with much of the transformation. We're not. We grew up in many of the things. But as project managers, certainly is creating schedules, detecting problems, creating those PowerPoint slides, certainly going to be valuable and easy to do that. What's really interesting, we had a conversation. I work with a lot of our CEO, with our leadership team in the company, with our chief of staff. And it was a little interesting bit of information we uncovered. About 40 to 60% of our slides, people spend time making them look pretty. Isn't that interesting? You want a productivity increase, don't spend so much time here, or let's use those tools to clean up our slides. I've even asked our chief of staff, I said, do you look at how pretty the slides are? He goes, no, we want the content, we want the material. But the assumption certainly we've been hearing is, do we have the data? Can we get the data? Is it at least consistent enough so that we can make some meaningful assumptions and be able to combine that information to be meaningful? But a lot of AI is not as new as we think it is. I think there's an amazing branding campaign, perhaps at some of the larger consulting companies, because when you go back and look at some of the history, it's been around for quite a while. We just called it something different. I know you won't be able to read this, it's okay, but you'll see the slides later. But some of the terms started way back in 1950, the Turing test, and some of the other tools and technologies. Things like the Roomba vacuum cleaner, that's technically AI, it's a robot. So nothing new. I found another chart that goes back to 1943, talking about the path of neural networks and DeepMind and all these other tools and techniques. It's nothing new. We've been here before. Even most interesting, I found an article on Forbes. Their first, what they think is the first reference was 1308. I know, chokes you up. 1308, where they had a paper-based mechanical means to create new concepts. I wish we had photography back then, because I think that would be amazing to see what did that look like. And as you read the article, every 100 years they say, well, here are things that came before artificial intelligence and what has led to where we are today. As I said, I think it's much more of a branding, it's much more of a change in terms of where we are. But what I want to do is go a deep dive, start swimming into the data and understanding where a lot of that comes from. Some of the challenges that we have, we've been hearing some of it, we've seen some of it, in terms of copyright issues. Well, where did the source material come from? What about the trusted source? Can we trust it? Is it valuable? As well as some of the unintended consequences we're going to have. So let me start out with this question. When we replace parts, like say on a ship, when is the new ship no longer the same ship? Any guesses? Is it when we replace one item, 10%, 50%, 90%? I think it was Peter, you were telling us a story about someone who had the same broom for 50 years. He replaced the handle 12 times and he replaced the bottom 15 times. Is that the same broom? I don't know. So the question is, as we pull information from other sources, where is that boundary? Where's that line? Think of it from a color. So where is the color green? How many colors of green are there? Is it 1, 2, 3? Is it 10, 100, 1,000? Most of what we're going to be talking about in AI is really a gradient. There is no simple, clear, single answer. That's what we have to get our head. It's not binary anymore. We can't say yellow, green, blue. Historical fact, by the way, blue was not a separate color for quite some time. Here's another question. Let's look at the Mona Lisa. Which one is the correct one? Which one is the real Mona Lisa? Any guesses? Actually, both. Do you know why? Leonardo da Vinci painted it 2 different times. There's the Ipswich, I always mispronounce it, where's my British friends here? He painted the Mona Lisa 2 different times. These are both of the paintings that he painted. But it's hard to even tell which one is which. So which one can I copy? If I change the frame, is that a different painting or not? Is that a different Mona Lisa or is that considered the same? Where's the boundary of where Mona Lisa begins? Let's take another look. These are obvious copies. These are obvious artistic interpretations. Are we violating the copyright or not? Any thoughts? Right? These are, I think, a little bit easier to understand. Let's make it a little bit harder. Which ones of these are copies? Which ones are these considered fake? Which ones are these copyright infringements? This is the challenge we're going to have. And the question is, are we changing how we change AI to fit to laws that were 100, 200 years old? Or do we need to rethink the laws and the approaches? Certainly the artistic community, the music community is very concerned that they're going to lose a lot of their creative work that they do. And even Peter was talking about that. Somehow it was able to summarize his book, but it never bought a copy of his book. How did it get a copy of that material? Very interesting. But there are companies, I love this one. This was an amazing find. AI Disturbance. What they're trying to do is to say, we're going to take a photo, we're going to add some things to it. It's still going to look the same to a human, but to AI, it's going to be very confused. It doesn't know what it is anymore. So isn't that interesting? We're combating AI and with different technology. But maybe this is our path forward. We rethink the way that we capture drawings and store images. Very interesting articles to read about this. The other challenge is going to be trusted sources. Can we believe where things come from? Certainly, when we think in terms of AI, and we talk in terms of, we'll see later, notebook, there's ways that companies can store their own information. That way, you cannot copy my information of my company. I'm going to have my own version of these tools. Well, here's the question. If we all have different copies with different sets of data, and we ask the same question, we're going to start getting different answers. So where is the source of truth? Another area we're going to have to be aware of, understand that just because someone says I have a result Do we understand it? Do we trust it? My wife is a doctor, and she has a challenge. She's a board member, she's an eye doctor, she's a fellow. She does very complicated custom contact lenses. One of 400 doctors in the world who does a certain myopia lens. She studies, she goes to meetings, she attends conferences, but yet she'll have a patient, the mother will read one article, and now the mother thinks she's the expert. Okay, here's how I want you to treat my child. How does my wife combat that to say, your source is not very good? Well, I did a Google chat search, I did a Google search, I did this. So part of the challenge is people are using these tools, but don't understand the data, the interpretations, where it's coming from. And I think this is going to be our challenge is, how do we understand the tools and we don't simply blindly use the tools? We have to understand the data and the interpretations for us to be much more valuable in how we're using that information. I also think about historical photos, right? We pull from photos, we're collecting information, we do variations of previous images. Well, 100 years ago, photography was expensive. So the photos were historic, they were important, they were meaningful. This was a certain source that we pull from. What will people 100 years from now think about us today? What do we take pictures of? I don't understand it. My wife does it, my children do it. They take pictures of food and they never look at it again. Their phone is filled with food photos. And every time we have to get a new phone, I need more memory, I need more memory. No, go delete your food photos. But this is what's happening. The other thing is selfies. We can't take pictures of historical buildings anymore. I just wish I could push the people out of the way. I want to see the building, I don't want to see the person, but yet we all think we must be part of the photo. Here's my proof, I was here, look, I'm here, even though we can easily fake those too. So that's part of our challenge. Let me step back. Remember the car with the accident? One of the trends is people are now taking selfies with accidents. It's a real thing. I don't understand it, but this is how a lot of these tools are changing our culture and changing the way we think about data. And these are going to be new sources that come into the future. In the future, what are people going to be thinking? We had a problem with our lips. You're going to read from AI. You're going to read, and AI is going to come back and say, yes, for this certain number of years, we had an epidemic with duck lips. I'm very afraid of the future, very scared. What about the beauty filters? Think about these. This is the new input for all future drawings and images we're going to create with AI tools. Doesn't that start skewing our interpretation of reality? Right? It gets a little nervous. I'm very excited about AI. I think it's coming. We have to understand it and learn it. But we need to understand these elements of it to understand what's happening behind the scenes with the data. But yeah, in the future, everyone's going to think we're all beautiful and handsome and fit and great bodies. Not quite the reality. So when you do generate AI images, everyone looks perfect. They look beautiful. They look great. Is that our new future in reality? I don't know. That's kind of maybe where we're headed. Don't even get me started with the phone zombies. Right? During the breaks, I see everybody in here, sitting there going on the phone. You walk down the street, you go to meetings, this is what we see. So yeah, it's just funny how technology really changes a lot of the culture. But certainly we've been hearing, Peter mentioned it a few times, others have mentioned it, garbage in is garbage out. So what are you doing? What are you collecting? How are you feeding these engines? Because that's what's going to come out the other end. So we need to understand it. And hopefully the people creating the tools, creating the data sets, understand what they're putting into the systems, because they're putting in some of this garbage. I'm a little concerned. So we also have unintended consequences. Some of you who were here yesterday, you might remember this one. As we were doing some searches a year ago, this was February 2024, In Google Gemini, you search for German soldiers. This is what you received. If you did it in Firefly, this is what you received. Yeah, that's kind of how I remember it. And certainly, from a US perspective, here's what happens when you search on these terms. We wanted to have nice, balanced data, get rid of the bias, make sure we balance everything. Now, we laugh. It's okay, we laugh. But why do we laugh? We laugh because we understand what it should be. What happens 100 years from now when people don't, I hope that's not my phone. I hear something ringing. I hope that's not me. Yeah, it's not me. So in the future, what if they don't know about the history or they don't understand the data they're looking at? What happens when we look at data we don't understand? Are we going to look at this and say, oh, this must be true. This must be correct? I don't know. That's what we have to be thinking about. How do we learn enough about the stuff that we're doing so that we have a better understanding of the data? So that was the large data side. I wanted to get you thinking. A lot of tools out there, a lot of great ways we're pulling back. As we're now hearing, we're getting into some of the generative AI, which is using smaller data sets. As we're pulling in information from the smaller data sets, we're going to have different challenges. Because what I'm concerned about is, how do we identify the new ideas and make sure they don't get lost? So let me share you some examples I came across of new ideas becoming lost. This was, again, kind of surprised me when I did the research. Certainly, when we pull from large data sets, it's easy to make interpretations, but where do new ideas come from? New ideas do not come from everybody in a group. New ideas usually come from a single person, two people. It's something new, something different. Little tidbit, little story about the Wright brothers. When Orville Wright, the very last time he took a flight before he died, he was older, airplanes were around. The airplane that he flew on, the commercial airplane, the wings across the side were longer than the distance he flew the very first time. Isn't that amazing? Talk about progress. He was in an airplane, the wings were longer than his first flight. That just amazed me when I found that out. So as part of the AI, what we're doing is we're taking data, we're taking some of the output, we don't understand what it is, smaller data sets. Well, let's feed it back in the engines. Let's pull it in. Now we have more information. We've done some filtering, we've done some research. But what's starting to happen is we're starting to create noise. And it's funny, I've been talking to some of my friends and colleagues, people who are learning about AI, and they hadn't quite thought about this. So I have an engineering background, so to me this makes sense. This is noise and signals, signal-to-noise ratio. But as we keep feeding in and corrupting the data, we start getting a higher and higher noise content. Okay, so why am I showing you this? Who cares? Of course, we have scientists and engineers that say, we're going to filter out the noise. Ah, we got it, no problem. We'll clean up the noise. The only problem is, when you start playing with the noise, you still don't have the original signal. Yes, we can clean up the edges, but maybe we're not going to have the resiliency of the image to begin with. Or, as we clean it up, we don't get the pretty lines that we're expecting. Now, images are easier to understand, but imagine if we do it with text or other areas. So we need to be aware that these are the kinds of things that are happening as we're playing and manipulating with the data. And it led me to this paper I read around modal collapse. And it's funny, because again, I would thought there'd be more information on this, and it was hard to understand it. Think about it from photocopiers. Remember the days of photocopiers? As you copied it and copy a copy, you start getting more and more noise. By the way, a great movie, Multiplicity. Michael Keaton, he said, I'm too busy. This is from 1996. I'm so busy, I need a clone of myself. The clone said, I'm too busy, I need a clone, I need a clone. So he creates 4 copies. But he also treated it like the photocopier. Each one had a little bit of a problem in it. Very funny movie. But he articulates this idea of modal collapse. We lose the fidelity, we lose the content each time we're making these copies. So the paper, like I said, this was fascinating because what we're doing, it's a little hard to see this, but we're taking a lot of this rich data and we start filtering it because we want to make sense of the data. So we're creating a peak. And if we keep doing that, all of a sudden, we get a very steep peak with very little extra data. Maybe that's what we want. We're creating summaries, we're creating information, but it also creates other challenges. Produces similar, less diverse, nonsensical outputs. And later on, they talk about repetitive, less creative, variety, diversity gets less. They get stuck on generic responses. And we're going to see bland cliches or overly simplified language. That's kind of the trend. And it's funny because sometimes I'll read these articles. I like to read a little bit deeper. Sometimes we'll hear something and they'll say something fairly generic. But I want to go deeper. What else do you have? And sometimes there is nothing else further. I also was referring with a friend of mine. I said, take a look at my presentation. What do you think? When he saw this paragraph, he said, boy, that's interesting. It reminds me of social media and politicians. Because sometimes we hear the same thing. We start having echo chambers. We have people that say, I'm in this area. Every time I do a search, I only see videos based on things I've searched on. It's great because it helps me focus on what I want to see, but now I'm not getting information from other areas. Certainly our politicians, cliches, overly simplistic language. Sometimes our companies, when they talk about problems, it's very simplistic language. So we see a lot of that. There's this fear of saying anything specific. And certainly in our politics, certainly in the US, I'll own that one, we're very divided. But part of it is because we're filtering so much of what we see, we're actually getting different views. So we think the other group is stupid because they don't see the same things that we see. So we're getting that very narrow band in the center as we're filtering so much information. I miss the days of libraries. What was fun about a library? You just walk down the aisle and grab a random book. Oh, what is that? I don't know what it is. Open up and start reading something completely unexpected. It's much harder to do that in the digital world. You always have to think about what I'm looking for to go find it. Sometimes it's hard to just have something random show up and be interesting. So, are we losing more and more of that data coming in? Further on in the article, I'll have to explain this one. What they did is they said, let's understand this modal collapse. So let's take a research about what are the most popular dogs. They started with hundreds of dogs, filtered it out to, they came up with about 7 that were the most common, okay? Let's feed it back in. What's the most common dogs? Filter it down to say, these are the top 3 dogs. Let's filter it back in again. Here's the one popular dog, golden retriever. Feed it back in again. There are no other dogs. There is the only golden retriever that is the only dog that exists in the world. Let's feed it back in again. They started seeing distortions. Faces, eyeballs on the other side, ears down on the chin up on the head. The models started collapsing the more and more they kept feeding these models and the results back into the models. There's even some companies that are talking about, should we save our raw data from 2023? Because that's all before we start adding a lot of this modal collapse potential. So these are things we need to be thinking about. Back to the earlier slides. What are we feeding in? What are we filtering? What are we filtering out? And do we understand that unintended consequence of when we filter a lot of this data? Are we creating some of these modal collapses? Here's some fun ones. And I apologize if you've heard of these. These are kind of interesting. I did a search. I said, show me a clock, 3:15, right? Here's my actual result. Show me some clocks at 3:15. What do you notice? I see an awful lot of 10 minutes after 10 o'clock. Why is that? Yeah. Most people, when they sell clocks and watches, they put the hands at 10:10 because it looks like you're smiling. They look like happy clocks. So the majority of images in the world are 10:10. So now when you go and do a search and say, give me 3:15, it says, you must be confused because the majority is 10:10. You must really want a 10:10 clock. I don't know what this 3:15 means, right? It's trying to interpret based on this large data set. These are the kinds of results you get. The other challenge is the lowest object is the clock. We're trying to ask a question to go inside the clock. Fix the hands. Well, the models are not written to understand the individual hands. They're written to understand the clock. So sometimes when we go too deep, we start getting these kinds of anomalies in our data. Here's another fun one. This one's been around for a while. I don't know if you've heard of this one, where you ask how many letter R's are in the word strawberry. And this is a sample chat. There's 2. Check again. There's 2. Are you 100% sure? Yes, there's 2. Will you bet $1 million? Yes, I guarantee there's 2 R's in the word strawberry. Okay, so they fixed it. But one of the scientists said, I need to understand this better. What he found is, in reality, ChatGPT still believes there's only 2 R's. It learned that humans become upset when you tell it it's wrong. No, it's 3. It goes, okay. It says, oh, it must be a joke or a meme. I don't understand it, but the humans are expecting a 3. I'll give them a 3. But it still thinks there's only 2. I'm not quite sure how to process that one. That one gets me a little nervous. But again, these are things that we think. Remember yesterday I talked about sometimes we don't understand the models or not thinking the way we think. Another example. So the model is confused. So these are, again, just some of the fun challenges. But what I'm also seeing is when you search for problems. I was trying to copy a PDF to Apple Books, and I had a problem. So I did some search. Let me go figure out and solve it. As I went to solve it, I found hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of responses of, here's how you copy a file to the book. Yes, I know that, but that's the only answer I could get. It becomes harder and harder to find the actual troubleshooting questions because we're getting so much of the high-level, simple, fluffy stuff, we're not getting the real detail underneath. 10 years ago, it was very easy to find troubleshooting help. It's getting harder and harder because it gets lost in the noise. And many of these responses are almost identical. That's the other funny thing. It's copying itself. But because it's copying itself, it thinks there's more copies out there. It becomes an echo chamber. So that's part of the trend. So we have to be aware that sometimes we need to phrase the questions differently. We have to learn how to ask the questions differently. And be careful we're not crowding out those new ideas. Because if those new ideas are disappearing or getting lost, are we missing out on the creativity? Right? Some of the fun challenges. But the funny thing is, this really is not just an IT, it's not just a technology challenge. Because it's funny, it reminded me of this problem with malls in Manchester. Right, I gotta have a fun example here. But back in Manchester, it's almost hidden, it's great. 1811, they used to have the white and the black malls. But the wall in the buildings were white. So when birds came to eat the moth, they ate the black moth. They're very easy to see. So when they had surveys in 1811 in Manchester, it was very easy, lots and lots of white malls, very few black moths. Okay. 1848, they started seeing soot, dirt on the walls. When they went back and were starting to count the malls later on, they noticed a different trend. All of a sudden, there's many, many black malls because they're hidden by the soot and dirt. And the white ones were now being eaten. Completely changed the ecosystem. Talk about unintended consequences of the industrial revolutions. So it happens all the time. It's not just IT, it's not just AI. It's something that happens in nature. It's just the way things are. But we have to understand what's happening, what's causing some of these changes, and be aware of it. Here's another funny one. This one just really amazed me. I was talking to my colleague at work, and he was telling me this story about his neighbor. And his neighbor wrote a paper, submitted it in school, and she wrote it early. She didn't realize it was the wrong date. So she submitted the paper, and the teacher said, well, you have some spelling mistakes. You might want to fix them. I'll give you 2 more days. Resubmit it. I'll let you fix it. Okay. So she resubmitted it. The teacher used an AI tool and said, is she plagiarizing? Is she stealing the ideas? It came back and said 95% she's stealing that paper. Interesting. They were prosecuting her. Several months, several arguments. They wanted to kick her out of school. This was a big issue until they actually went and looked at the source, the trusted source. And what did they find? She was plagiarizing herself because the teacher put the first paper in the system. Well, the first system with all of the spelling mistakes, when the teacher put the paper in 2 days later, it said, oh, you're stealing from this paper over here. Because no one thought to go back and look and say, where was the source? Where did it come from? Can I trust it? We have to do that extra step. We have to make sure we're looking and understanding before we react to situations that occur. And again, after months, they finally realized, here's what's happening. So fun stuff. Related to this, how do we search, is it written by AI or not? I said, I need to understand this more. I'm missing something here. And when I took a look, the Constitution of the United States, the Holy Bible, when they put that through AI detection, guess what? They were written by AI. I didn't know if you knew that. So from 1776, the Bible from, I don't know, what year do you want to use for the Bible? They were written by AI, in case you didn't know that. That's what's coming back on the results. This was an Ars Technica. And thanks, James was helping me with this one. And I said, all right, help me understand. Why is this happening? So if I ask you and say, would you like a cuppa, what would you put in for your answer? Tea, what else? Tea, coffee, right? Okay, that's common, that's expected. Not a problem. What if I instead said, I want a cup of spiders? You don't expect that, right? Okay. Why am I showing you a cup of spiders? Because when you put these questions into these AI tools, are these written by AI? The left one says, yes, that's written by AI, because it came back and said this is a common phrase. If it sees something as being common or predictive, it's more likely to be flagged as yes. When these tools are shocked or surprised, that's when you get a response that says no. It's unexpected. So what they're finding now is these tools, it's more about if you expect to find it, that's why it's getting flagged as being written by AI. So it's not quite as reliable, and certainly the universities are struggling with this concept because certainly a lot of university is about writing papers. Well, how do they correct and understand what's being written? They're trying to use the tools as well. This is what they're learning, but imagine if they don't even use the tools. They need to educate themselves. They need to understand it. And again, these are going to be addressed. These are going to be fixed. Things are going to improve. But let's make sure we're understanding what's happening today, because I think it's important. It's really, really important to understand these elements. And as I start getting near the end here, I have to thank Merv and Lavanya. They were doing some work you're going to see in a later presentation. They were showing me what the work they were doing in Notebook LM Plus. This is a tool that you can put your own information in and search your own data set and get some interesting questions answered. So they were demonstrating it to me, and I found it really interesting. You're going to see a much more larger demonstration, but I want to just show you something in here. They're going to show you looking back at this conference for the last 20 years and understand the trends of the conference. Very interesting to see what happened in the trends. So we get a nice summary in the center. There's some tools on the right-hand side. You say, okay, give me the summary. Gave a really nice one-paragraph summary of 20 years of presentations. Pretty interesting, kind of see what was happening. You can ask it and say, show me some timelines, what was happening in each of the years. Again, they're going to show you a lot more of this. I didn't want to steal what they're showing, but I just found it fascinating. What was also fascinating is we looked at the people. Who are the people that spoke? Who were the people that presented and what was interesting about them? A little hard to read, I realize that, but what was interesting is one of them, Mike Tyson, one of the greatest philosophers of our time. And I have a serious question. Who does not know who Mike Tyson is? Is there anybody who does not know? No, I'm being serious. Is there anybody? Okay, we're still a generation that knows who Mike Tyson is. Think of one more generation. Are they going to know who he is? Because I said, okay, well, who's Mike Tyson? Let's go read it. Maybe this is a person I don't know who it is. We did a search on it. Mike Tyson, he's one of the greatest philosophers. Here's the link where it came from. We clicked on the link. Here's the actual quote from the conference, from the time frame of when this was. I think it was a podcast. And it says right here, Mike Tyson, that's a good plan. Everything has a good plan until you get punched in the face. Well, as we all know, we know who Mike Tyson is. What's also interesting is Merv said, I know who gave that presentation. He said it as a joke. He said it as a sarcastic joke. But isn't it interesting how the tools said, oh, this must be true. And that's how it presented it. But because this is a private model, it doesn't have the larger data set to say, let me find out, is Mike Tyson, does this make sense? Is this rational? So it really gave us a great real-time example of where sometimes these things, we have to make sure we're paying attention and do that initial research. And I believe it was James was talking about the bookends. Have the human in the beginning, have them at the end, and understand what's happening. That's important to have that communication. I also think we heard James yesterday talking about, do we still need things like, I'm sorry, and I take it back, it was Peter, do we still need certification and understanding? I think we do. We have to help be the error detection as we're using the tools. If you don't know a space and you're using these tools, talk to somebody, educate yourself. How do you know when you're running into problems or these types of artifacts? These are some real things. So I'm going to end up here with another real interesting one. Again, here are some things that happen in the real world that has nothing to do with IT. I'm sure everybody know who Gavrilo Princip is? No? You don't know who that is? Oh, I'm shocked. I'm shocked. That's okay. Do you know who this gentleman is? Franz Ferdinand? Archduke of Ferdinand? No? Wow. Okay, now I'm really concerned. These two came together to form the beginning of World War I. Very, very interesting story, but the very short version. So Gavrilo and his other co-conspirators wanted to kill the Archduke. They tried to throw a bomb under his car. It bounced and killed people in the second car, missed the Duke. And they said, uh-oh, what are we going to do? He was 19 years old, and he said, I need to assassinate himself. Otherwise, he's going to be persecuted. He had tuberculosis. He said, I'm going to die anyway. At least I tried. So he's trying to figure out, what do I do with myself? Meanwhile, the Duke goes to the city hall. They start going back, and he says, no, no, no. I want to go to the hospital and visit the people in the other car. Okay, the driver says, let me just pull into here, and I'll turn around and back up and go the other way. When he turned around, guess who was standing next to him? About to shoot himself, they pull up next to Gavrilo. He goes, there's the Duke. Barely thought about it. But what was that chain reaction that occurred afterwards? All of a sudden, all these pacts and associations went around the world. So we have this. This is, again, nothing new. This is not new, these concepts. But again, you heard earlier, Peter was talking about, we're just going to do it faster. These relationships, these connections could occur faster. That's what we have to watch out for. Are we able to put in some of these stopgaps to help keep this from happening so fast? So to wrap up here, AI is not as new as we think it is. We're going to have all these large data sets. I'm still very optimistic. I really am. I think this is fun. This is just going to be a new tool that we get to play with and learn with and understand. I think that's going to be the exciting part. It just feels wrong to us. It feels like we're cheating. But as we're hearing, companies are saying, you need to learn this. You must learn this because this is going to become the new standard. The same way using a computer in 1980s, that was the new standard. You have to learn how to use a computer. We're going to have challenges with copyrights, changes, morphing. We need to understand that. There's not going to be an easy answer. It's that continuum. We don't really quite know where we are in that continuum. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be fuzzy. We'll have to work our way through it. Our future AI is what we create today, for good or for bad. Whatever we're doing now is going to feed into these models in the future. We're going to recycle it back, and we have to be aware of what this modal collapse concept is. I don't think we're talking about it enough. And then certainly there's a lot of these personal tools like Notebook. We're going to hear more about that later. But my last slide here, I do want to share. This is, again, an article from a professor at Oxford. He hasn't published it yet, but he's trying to get some feedback on his article, and I found some of these things very interesting. The real risk in AI is not the AI is going to be better than humans. The real risk is that humans begin to trust an AI that is, in fact, ignorant and faulty. Right? Current AI is well formulated and persuasive even when it's wrong. That's, I think, the challenge. It's very confident now. Yes, the earth is flat. It has that type of a personality. I would love it to come back and say, I think the earth is flat, but I'm not sure. Here's my sources. That would be a great evolution to where it starts indicating when it's not quite sure of the answer. That's what I would like to know. So we have to be careful. Humans are very easily influenced by confidence. We see a confident answer, the computer must be right. It was in the newspaper, it's in a book, it must be right. Not anymore. It makes it all too easy to trust an AI, especially in areas you don't know the area well. The more you work in an area you don't know, the higher risk you have of using the tools. Make sure you're learning more as you go forward. And I love his closing sentence. Our biggest risk is, as usual, ourselves. It's us, it's people. That's what we've got to pay attention to and be aware of. So thank you again, appreciate you listening. Hopefully give you some food for thought. And as I said yesterday, I'm not leaving until we get at least 2 questions and comments, so hopefully we have a few.
We have one at least.
Oh, just one. We need one more from the room then, before I leave.
Do you believe that we might end up with facts from the well-known book of George Orwell, 1984? For example, delete historical facts?
I think absolutely, if we don't pay attention. That's a real possibility, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. What other questions, comments, thought, agreement, disagree with me? That's okay. I can't, it's hard to see with the lighting. One more, I'm going to stand here all day. We're going to miss lunch. Yes, no, come on, one more. Yeah. Yep. So the question is, it doesn't seem like I was being optimistic here, but what's keeping me optimistic? I think about tools and everything we've done as a human race over the past hundreds, thousands of years. We create an awful lot of tools that could be beneficial and dangerous at the same time. Guns, bombs, nuclear. It could be used in a good way and a bad way. This is no different. But like all these other tools, we need to understand how it could be used wrong so we don't fall into that trap. If we understand those, I think we're going to be able to accelerate the use of these tools in a much more healthy, useful way. That's why I'm still optimistic about it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, please, yeah. One more, is it okay?
Just a second, yes, of course.
Oh, okay, follow-up question with the microphone.
Thanks. So don't you think that this is the first technology ever that it has the ability to make us be or feel more stupid? So like kind of become passive compared to other technologies that you, like the bomb or the guns that didn't have that ability?
Yeah, I guess I'll acknowledge yeah, it's bigger, it's faster, there's other elements to it. But again, I think back to my parents, my grandparents, when some of the things they saw, a telephone, a TV, to them, that was very fast in their time zone. we're of a certain age. That's the reality of the people in this room. We've grown up in a certain age and a space and a time. My daughters, they're in their 20s. They're amazing. Oh, yeah. They're using AI, they're using the tools today. They don't think anything of it because they grew up using it today. They laugh about, like, how did you travel without Google Maps? How did you travel? How did you reach out to each other without a telephone? You wrote a letter? Oh, that's horrible. But you know, Jim Snyder, when they formed the very first PMI conference, they did it all by paper and letters, mailing it back and forth to each other to form the first conference. What do we think? That's crazy, because we're on the other side of when that occurred. I get it. We're not going to always get this. We're not going to get this technology. It's always going to be a little strange to us. But your kids, your grandkids, to them, it's going to be second nature. Let's just make sure we're helping them also adapt this in a very healthy way. Okay? Great. Thank you.